Subscribe to our YouTube channel, press the bell icon and stay entertained. Tracking milestones of an incredible journey spanning 30 years. Rahman Music Sheets.
For me, it was a very simple story about two women trying to find some emotional sustenance in their lives. The Indian producer started laughing. He said, "There's no chance in hell that you are going to get Mr. Rahman because he is one of the busiest artists and he's also a very conservative man. Your film is about two lesbians. There is no chance." I thought the most beautiful process of starting to work with Rahman was he'd be sitting behind the keyboard and there'd be a moment of silence and he would light a candle. And it was a real moment of purity and I think his Sufi belief, which is all about purity, really.
Fire, the first installment of the Elements trilogy by Deepa Mehta, an Indo-Canadian filmmaker. It was released in 1996 at the Toronto International Film Festival, or TIFF. The same year, the same festival also witnessed the release of Kama Sutra by Meera Nair, an Indo-American director. With films featuring mainstream artists like Rekha and Shabana Azmi, it seemed like India was finally embracing subjects that were considered taboo. Fire is considered to be the first mainstream Hindi film to depict individual sexual choices. After editing the film, Deepa Mehta decided to meet Rahman.
My first meeting with A.R. Rahman, I will never forget, ever in my life, because it was amazing. I had seen Roja and I had seen Bombay, and I'm a big fan of Mani Ratnam's, but I'd never heard music like the kind I heard. So when I made the film called Fire, my producers asked me, who would you, in the world, if you could have a choice of anybody, who would you want to compose the music for Fire? And I said, without a thought, I said A.R. Rahman. And the Indian producer started laughing. He said, "There's no chance in hell that you are going to get Mr. Rahman because he is one of the busiest artists and he's also a very conservative man. Your film is about two lesbians. There is no chance." I said, "Okay, whatever, but let him say that. Why are you saying that? Just get me a meeting with him." So I got a meeting with him. I flew from, I think it was from Toronto to Chennai. And I went to his studio and it was very interesting because A.R., I call him A.R., and that's because he's a friend now, but he came out and he said, "Okay, let's see it." And I said, "Do you know what it's about?" He said, "Yes, I've been told what your film is about. So do you have a video of it?" I said, "Yes, I do." So he said, he called his wife Saira. He said, "Okay, so Saira, myself and you will watch it. Let's watch it upstairs in their house." So that was my first exposure to a man who was a brilliant composer and yet completely open, and invited me to his home. He'd never met me. We went upstairs. Saira and Rahman and myself sat and watched the whole of Fire in one, sitting on the ground on a video machine, on a TV screen, and he finished seeing it and he said, "I like it, I'll do it." And that was it. I mean, so how can you forget not only somebody who's super talented, but somebody who is so open? And it isn't about sexuality or the color of one's skin or what one's religion is. It's about the evocation of what the film means. And that, I think, is what makes Rahman one of the most amazing music composer, is because it comes from a space which is almost spiritual. And I'll never forget that. So that was my first meeting with Mr. A.R. Rahman. Yeah.
Fire was released in India in November 1998. It had 16 instrumental tracks, of which 14 were composed by A.R. Rahman. For each character and key situations, Rahman created theme tracks.
Ma'am, Fire didn't have any songs as we understand them in Indian cinema. Whose idea was it?
It was my idea. I mean, I did not want any songs in Fire. I think songs in Fire wouldn't have done anything. I can't even imagine. So for me, I mean, a score is a score. I've done North American films where you don't have songs. You only have songs in musicals. So for me, Fire did not deserve or even need, let's say, songs in any way. It wasn't that kind of a film. But it needed an incredible score. And the score of Fire is just amazing. He took it to such strange and wonderful heights, which showed the compassion and the emotional, needs and emotional desire to have some kind of understanding of women. He understood what it was like for women to be estranged.
In the mid-90s, films without songs were considered commercially unviable. Was Rahman okay with this idea?
I think you're talking to the wrong person, because I've never done a film that I felt, okay, it has to have a commercial viability. I don't even think like that. I'm what's called an independent filmmaker, and I don't think that Mr. A.R. Rahman thought or even thought for a second that what is going to make this a commercial film. He doesn't think like that way, and neither do I.
You just mentioned that Rahman's music took the film Fire to a different height altogether. Can you elaborate?
I think that any good score, if it is a good score, takes a film to another level. I mean, I know many films that are fabulous that have no score at all. But I think that for me, music has always been an important part of my life, and I really did feel that good music or good music composition is what adds to the collaborative nature of a film. So a music score doesn't exist by itself. So you can have a fabulous music score, but if the performances aren't that good, or if the cinematography isn't that good, or if the story of the film is not good, what's the point? Nobody remembers a good score if the film isn't good. So a film is a completely collaborative piece. And I think a good composer or a superb composer is one who understands that their position in a film is about collaboration.
Ma'am, when the music was getting created, what was the process? Can you share some of your memories?
I just think the whole process was amazing. I'd never done anything like that before, where Rahman would only actually what I thought was really lovely was and different was that he worked at nights. So that for me was I'd come from the hotel at about 8 or 9 o'clock, and then in the evenings he would go into his studio and work, and we'd be sitting outside, 2 or 3 of us. I remember Shekhar was there, and Ram Gopal, I think, was there because of another film that he was doing. Anyway, we were 2 or 3 of us waiting for our turn to come. But I was lucky because I was a woman, so I'd get upstairs, I'd get invited upstairs, and I'd have really nice sambar and rice and get spoiled by Saira. And then when my turn would come, it would be wonderful because it would be like about 10 at night, and we'd go into the studio, and there was Rahman behind the keyboard. And this happened during many of our films when working together, where I thought the most beautiful process of starting to work with Rahman was he'd be sitting behind the keyboard, and there'd be a moment of silence, and he would light a candle, and it was a real moment of purity and I think his Sufi belief, which is all about purity, really. And then he'd strike one note on his keyboard, and it would unfold, and magic would happen. I remember that very clearly.
In Fire, the theme track of Bombay was also used. Was it your idea or Rahman's idea?
It was my idea. I told AR, I said, I love the theme of Bombay. And he said, but it's been used. Why do you want to do it? I'll do something else to you. But I said, I feel it's so haunting that I would love to use it. So, in fact, I called up Mr. Mani Ratnam and I said, how do you feel about me using it? And he said, go ahead. So it was Rahman wasn't that keen, but then he liked the idea. Yeah.
In the film Bombay, the theme track was used actually to highlight the agony of communal and physical violence. By using it in Fire, were you trying to highlight the emotional violence that these two characters were subjected to?
No, it wasn't violence at all. I mean, I know what it was used for but I don't think it was used for violence even in Bombay. I think the theme of Bombay was about a transition from one place to another, and how do you do that transition, whether it's from a negative space to a positive space, or it's time passing with incredible complexity. That's what I loved about that theme.
Fire was partly based on Lihaaf, or The Quilt, a short story by Ismat Chugtai, an Indian writer and filmmaker. When she wrote Lihaaf in 1942, it led to an uproar and obscenity trial. Ismat Chugtai had to defend herself in the Lahore court. More than half a century later, Fire, based on Lihaaf, was released. But nothing much had changed in Indian society.
Fire triggered a public dialogue about lesbian relationships in India. In mid-90s, how did you gather courage to even deal with such a subject?
I didn't even think it was courageous. I just thought it was a very important story. I didn't say, I'm going to do something that's courageous. If you do have, that's a terrible way to start a film, to think that, oh my God, I'm going to change the world, or I'm going to do something courageous. For me, it was a very simple story about two women trying to find some emotional sustenance in their lives.
If you were to look back at Fire and its music today, how would you do that?
I enjoyed Fire. There were many reasons I liked that film a lot. Is that it's obviously the performances of Nandita and Shabana were superb. I think the production design, everything. But the music was so beautiful, and there was a purity in what Rahman found in their relationship and made it from words into something that was musical. That was amazing. So Fire was a very special film for me for many reasons, but one of the main reasons is it introduced me to A.R. Rahman's music.
Dhimi dhimi, dhimi dhimi, khushboo hai tera badan. सुलगे महके पिघले दहके क्यों ना बहके मेरा मन.
1947 Earth, the second film that brought Deepa Mehta and A.R. Rahman together. To share stories behind its music, Deepa Mehta continues in our next episode. Stay with us.
कि नशा गुला है समा भी जैसे धुआं धुआं.
Subscribe to our YouTube channel, press the bell icon and stay entertained.